Hi, I'm Maura. And 3 nights ago at Christmas dinner, my older sister stood up, slammed her wine glass on the table, and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Return the $90 or you'll never see Mom and Dad again." No warning, no build-up, just a cold-blooded execution in front of the entire family. But honestly, that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing it wasn't spontaneous. It was rehearsed, planned, quietly choreographed behind my back for months. And the look on my mother's face when it happened, like it was deserved, like I'd brought it on myself. And while they accused, chuckled, and humiliated me. Over dessert, I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I just reached into my purse and laid something on the table that shifted the entire room. But we'll get there. First, quick check. What time are you listening and where from? I read every comment. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't show up in screams. It whispers until it thinks you're too broken to fight back. There's something off about Christmas Eve in coastal California. Maybe it's the palm trees wrapped in string lights, or the fact that it's 56 degrees and someone's still grilling outside. I pulled into my mother's driveway at 6:15 p.m. sharp, as agreed, and parked behind my sister Elisa's aggressively perfect SUV, which unsurprisingly was double parked like it owned the house. I had 2 things in hand, a canvas tote filled with hand-poured gifts, and my purse clutched tight. Inside was a note I'd written at 1:00 a.m., the night before a small speech, a thank you, an olive branch. I'd printed it on nice paper, even added gold stars in the margins, like a child desperate for extra credit. I wanted it to be a moment of peace, of closure. Instead, it turned into my trial. The porch light flickered as I walked up, but I didn't even get the chance to knock. My mother opened the door like she had a built-in alarm that went off when I got too close. "Maura," she said. Flat. No hug. Just my name, like it was a technical error. The inside smelled like honey ham and warm sugar. I inhaled deep, the kind of scent that makes your heart ache in nostalgia, and I almost forgot the weird knot in my stomach until I saw the dining table. Everything was pristine. Gold foil napkins, silver cutlery, printed name cards in cursive, all except for one spot. "Where's my place?" I asked. "Oh," my mom said, turning quickly to the sideboard. "Elise thought you'd prefer the corner, something quieter. You know how you get with noise." She gestured toward the folding chair, not even at the table, against the wall beside the buffet, like a waiter on break. I didn't argue. I just quietly pulled the chair in myself, tried not to let the scrape echo too loud. But Elise saw. She wanted me to see that Maura always wants the low-key spot right, she chirped. Less attention. She laughed like it was a joke. Others joined in. Even Uncle Pete smiled like it was a harmless tease. I smiled too. A practiced one. The kind that hurts your molars. That chair didn't just feel temporary. It felt like a warning. Dinner went exactly how you'd expect in a family where one child is adored and the other is tolerated like a necessary inconvenience. Stories I wasn't part of. Inside jokes about childhood vacations I wasn't invited to. A wine bottle that never made it to my end of the table. I waited for the toasts. Because this was my moment. My speech. My single thread of connection. Dad gave Elise the nod. She stood like a politician. Charming. Polished. Her toast got a full applause. A standing ovation in emotional manipulation. Then it was my turn. I stood, raised my glass, and reached for the mic. It didn't work. I tapped it. Flipped it. Nothing. "Oh no," Elise said. All concerned innocence. Dead batteries. She shrugged. Guess it wasn't meant to be. Laughter. Light. Awkward. No one offered a fix. I folded my speech, slipped it back into my purse, and sat. It stung. But I told myself it's just a moment. Let it go. Then came gifts. Every year we exchange one gift. Small. sentimental. I'd made a scrapbook, a full album chronicling Dad's last year before he passed. The hospital visits, the letters, the moments no one else saw. It took me 3 nights to finish. Elise handed it to Mom. "This is from me," she said brightly. I blinked. "Wait, what?" Mom opened it slowly, pages fluttering like betrayal in motion. "This is beautiful," she whispered. I froze. That was my handwriting on the margin of Dad's letter. My notes in the corners. My design. My tears soaked into the page. She didn't even pretend she made it. She just claimed it. The applause hers, the silence mine, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't new. It was a pattern. Quiet. Methodical. The family tree portrait where my name was left off. The church poem I wrote, but Elise performed. The eulogy at Dad's service, my words, her face. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was a strategy. I tried to focus on the room, on anything but the inferno building in my chest. Then I saw Mom whisper something to Elise. Elise stood again, glass in hand, fake humility in full swing. "I just want to say how grateful we all are to be together tonight," she said. I should have known, but before dessert, she added, "There's something important we need to address." Everyone turned, slowly, predictably, toward me, and that was when I knew. The folding chair, that wasn't a mistake. It was a message. They didn't dim the lights this time. No soft glow, no pretense of warmth, just the harsh clarity of overhead bulbs that buzzed faintly, while everyone settled back at the table like they were about to watch a performance. And spoiler, I was the main act. Elise still stood glass raised. Her mouth moved like she was rehearsing a closing argument. "We all talked about it," she began. "And we didn't want to bring it up like this, but you've made it kind of impossible not to." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. That kind of line never ends with anything good. She continued. "You moved $90,000 from Mom and Dad's account last year, right before Dad passed." Every fork froze midair. Wait, what? I asked. Calmly. Quietly. Like maybe if I spoke gently enough, this wouldn't become what it clearly already was. Elise tilted her head, like I'd just dropped a dirty dish in her clean kitchen. "You said it was for hospice care, but when we reviewed the bank statements, there's no receipt, no contract, nothing." Then came the follow-up punch, so we need you to give it back. Across from me, Kyle, my younger cousin, suddenly found something fascinating in the stitching on the tablecloth. Uncle Pete cleared his throat like he wanted to object, but thought better of it. And Mom Lorraine just kept her eyes on her lap, dabbing a corner of her napkin like it was all too sad for her to engage in. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't snap. That's what they wanted. "You think I stole from them?" I asked Elise directly. Her voice was syrupy now. "No one's saying stole. We're saying misplaced, misappropriated, which legally is the same thing, but emotionally, I cut her off, finally letting a sliver of my voice sharpen. "You don't get to accuse me of theft and then wrap it in scented tissue paper. Dorian, my older brother, the eternal mediator, jumped in hands, raised like a cop in a hostage situation. "Maura, we just want transparency, that's all." Funny. That's never what they wanted before. A year ago, Dad had called me at 11:42 p.m. I remember because I was already in bed watching some bad holiday rom-com, and his name lighting up my screen made my stomach drop. He was breathless, quiet, not his usual firm tone. "I don't want to make a big thing out of this," he'd said, "but I'm going to try one more round. Experimental. Insurance won't touch it, but I think it's worth it." I asked how much. He didn't pause. 90. I wired it that night. From my savings. No questions. No receipts. Because that's what you do when you love someone. When you know it might buy them a little more time to see one more season, to taste Mom's cinnamon rolls again, to write one more awkward birthday card. He didn't make it to the trial. And now, apparently, I was being billed for trying. Okay, I said softly, scanning the table. Let's say I did move the money, which I did. Let's say it's not documented, which fair it's not. But you think I did it to what? Upgrade my Honda? Buy a vacation house I never visited? Elise shrugged. We're just asking for clarity. No, I corrected. You're asking for blood. She blinked. Just once. But it was enough to tell me she hadn't expected me to speak plainly. To not beg or cry or explain myself into a corner. Dorian tried again. Look, we just think it's best if the funds are returned. We don't want to get legal involved. Already sounds like you did, I said, cutting him off. Silence. Not even the tree lights twinkled. Mom still hadn't looked at me, and that was the part that cut deepest. That was the moment it shifted for me. Not when they accused me. Not when they tried to gaslight a year's worth of grief into a fiscal error. It was when I realized no one here believed me. Or worse, maybe they did, but it was easier not to. Easier to believe I was selfish. That I took. That I hoarded credit and dodged responsibility. Easier to cast me as the black sheep than admit they'd depended on me for so long. They forgot I wasn't obligated to keep saving them. I stood up. Not dramatically. Just enough for the chair to squeak a little as it slid back. You know, I said, voice even, this isn't about $90,000. It's about rewriting history again. Dorian exhaled. Maura, don't make this bigger than it is. I looked him dead in the eye. It's already bigger than you understand. I just didn't want to be the one to say it first. That's when I reached into my purse, pulled out a manila folder. Not thick, not dramatic, just precise. I laid it gently next to the untouched pie and slid it forward. Inside, I said, is a copy of the wire transfer. From my account. Time-stamped. Verified. Labeled with Dad's treatment reference ID from Mountain View Hospice. Elise's face twitched. And just for fun, I added, there's a notarized letter from the hospice office confirming they received the funds. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. Because while you were planning this little family ambush, I was preparing for it. I sat down. Not in the folding chair this time. I took the one they left empty, the one meant for guests. Dorian reached for the folder. Elise snatched it first. She opened it. Her eyes darted. Don't. She didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. Everyone else stayed still. Even Mom, especially Mom. I sipped my water. I don't want an apology, I said quietly. I want acknowledgement. No one moved. So I stood again, and this time I walked out. I didn't drive home right away. I parked in the empty lot behind the neighborhood pharmacy. Sat there in the dark engine, off staring out at a row of dimly lit storefronts, like they might offer answers. Or comfort. They didn't. The manila folder was on the passenger seat beside me, slightly bent at the corners. Inside was everything I thought I needed. Proof, truth, clarity. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like I'd thrown a lifeline into a room full of people already walking away. They didn't argue after I left. They didn't chase me. Didn't call. Not even a text. When I got home, the apartment was quiet, just the faint hum of the fridge and the click of the hallway heater kicking on. I tossed my coat onto the couch and dropped the folder on the kitchen counter. Then I remembered something. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, the kind legal documents come in. Elise had handed it to me earlier in the week at brunch. No explanation. Just, Mom wants everyone to have a copy. Standard stuff. Back then, I'd shoved it into my bag without reading it. I didn't have the energy to think about estate paperwork. But tonight, it felt like it might matter. Like it might hold another piece of whatever game I was too late to realize I'd been drafted into. I sat down, ripped it open, and unfolded the pages. It was a copy of Lorraine and Dad's revised will, 7 pages printed in dry, emotionless legal language. the kind that says everything without really saying anything. I skimmed for my name, and then I slowed down, because I didn't see it. Not in the section about the house, not under joint savings or personal property of sentimental value, not even in the note about family heirlooms. Instead, there was a single line near the end that stopped my breath cold. Mora has been provided for outside of this will. That was it. A formal lie dressed up in passive voice. I sat back in my chair, stunned. I flipped through the pages again, hoping I missed something. I didn't. They hadn't just accused me. They had erased me. Here's the thing: I never counted on an inheritance. Not once. I didn't pay for Dad's treatments because I expected repayment. I didn't refinance my condo to help fix their kitchen because I thought it earned me something. But still, it meant something to know I was included. Once, I remembered years ago an older draft of the will had me down for 40% of the estate. I never saw the exact list, but Dad told me himself one evening in the hospital when he thought he might not make it through the week. I know you never asked for anything he'd said, but I made sure you're taken care of. You always take care of everyone else. Now I wasn't just cut out. I was officially disposable. The next morning, I was halfway through making toast when my phone buzzed. Dorian. I stared at the screen, deciding whether to let it ring. He texted instead. "Can we meet, just talk? No drama." I didn't answer. But I got in the car, 20 minutes later, and drove to the park near our old high school. We sat on a cold bench by the baseball field, both staring at the empty grass like it held something sacred. He spoke first. I didn't know they changed the will until last month. I didn't respond. He added I thought it was temporary, that they'd fix it. They? I asked, finally looking at him. Mom and Elise, mostly Elise. She convinced Mom you'd be fine, that you don't need the money. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly on brand. So being stable means I'm out. He hesitated. They said you've already gotten your share. Helping with the house, the treatments. Yeah, you mean the stuff I paid for. That no one else did. He nodded. I know. Why didn't you say anything? His mouth opened, then closed, because he didn't have an answer. I drove home without speaking another word, and somewhere between the traffic light on 14th and the gas station on Elm, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. They didn't remove me because I didn't matter. They removed me because I mattered too much when it was inconvenient, and not at all when it was time to be seen. I was the fixer, the quiet helper, the one who kept the peace by swallowing the tension, the one who drove Dad to his chemo appointments without complaint, the one who remembered Mom's medication schedule better than she did. And now I was being punished for not making noise. That night, I opened my hallway closet. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I think I just needed something to do with my hands. I ended up pulling out an old wooden tray filled with cables, Sharpies, and flash drives. One caught my eye. Silver, labeled in faint marker. Hospice plus docs. My breath caught. I plugged it into my laptop, folder after folder opened. Organized. Dated. Invoices. Emails. Insurance rejections. Treatment summaries. And then a PDF titled M. The Hospice Transfer Bosfer. It was the original transaction. The $90 thous transfer. From my personal checking account. Time-stamped. Labeled. Certified. I stared at the screen, barely blinking. And slowly I smiled. Not out of revenge. Not yet. But out of clarity. Because I'd found something they didn't expect. Receipts. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't done. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset. Not even because I was angry. I was focused. I sat at my kitchen table with two folders open, one labeled Hospice Docs, the other Will. Updated. On the left was the digital proof of the $90,000 transfer. On the right was the paper that claimed I'd already been provided for. One was truth. The other, a weapon dressed in fine print. And the signature, that's what stopped me cold. Lorraine's signature, my mother's, was at the bottom of the new will, but it didn't look right. Her handwriting had always been elegant looping with an exaggerated L that she carried from her Catholic school cursive days. This one, flat, tilted, no loop. I pulled a birthday card from my fridge, one she'd given me just 2 months before. Compared the two. Not even close. It wasn't a bad forgery, it just wasn't hers. And I knew what that meant. Someone hadn't just erased me. They'd falsified a legal document to make sure it stayed that way. That's when I got methodical. I've worked in compliance for over a decade. Fraud detection, internal audit reviews. I don't just know how to catch mistakes. I know how to document them so thoroughly that no one even thinks about questioning what's real. I created a new folder on my desktop, Redemption. In it, I dragged the following: the $90,000 hospice transfer PD, a scan of the birthday card with Lorraine's real signature, the new will with the suspicious signature, metadata timestamps of the flash drive, the previous estate draft Dad gave me access to in 2019. Then I backed it all up. Twice. 2 days later, I texted Natalie, a compliance attorney I hadn't worked with since my audit firm days. We weren't friends exactly, but there was mutual respect, and more importantly, she owed me. Hey. Quick question. Hypothetically, if someone forged a signature on a family estate document and it affected inheritance, what's the cleanest way to verify that? Her reply came within 5 minutes. Nat, bring what you have. I'll make the coffee. I drove across town that afternoon. No makeup, hair in a ponytail. Dressed like it was just another Tuesday, even though everything inside me felt like I was headed into court. I handed her a flash drive. She didn't say anything at first, just opened the files. Her brow furrowed. Her fingers tapped the table. 10 minutes later, she leaned back. They forged this, she said plainly. Sloppy but passable. Except you've got the handwriting samples. You're lucky you kept this. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like my whole life had been a setup. And this was their final attempt to lock the door behind them. The next morning, I was getting ready to email Natalie some follow-up documentation when a ping hit my phone. Work email. Subject line: urgent compliance. Matter, action required. My heart dropped. I clicked. It was from HR. Attached was a voice memo allegedly of me discussing falsifying records, misappropriating funds, and covering my tracks. They said it came in anonymously. They said legal was reviewing it. They needed me on a call in 1 hour. I listened to the audio 3 times. It was my voice, my tone, my cadence, but it wasn't real. They'd cut and spliced old recordings from Zoom calls, voicemails, and meeting recaps. I could even hear where they clipped the ums and stretched the timing between words. It was a deepfake, deliberate, precise, but not perfect, because I never said covering my tracks in that tone. And I never used the phrase, "they'll believe me anyway." Ever. And I knew who was behind it. I remembered the backyard, the wine, the music. The casual recording Elise had done for fun when I was talking about my team's Q4 audit results. She'd always said she liked watching me work like it was some performance. She had the audio, she had the tools, and now she had the motive. I opened a browser, logged into a digital forensics site I used for work, and ran the file through a voice integrity checker. It flagged 6 manipulation points. Boom. I gathered everything into a clean indexed folder, uploaded it to our compliance system, sent it directly to legal with a short message. Please review attached evidence. Audio tampering confirmed. I am prepared to cooperate fully. No panic, no emotion, just facts. Just the truth sharpened into a blade. That night around 10:30 p.m., there was a knock at my door. It was Dorian. No umbrella, no jacket, just a soaked hoodie and guilt. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I didn't know she'd go that far, he said. Before I even got a word in, I didn't say anything, just let the silence do the heavy lifting. Then he pulled a flash drive from his pocket. I found this on her desktop, he said. Project file. It has your old voice recordings, her edits, her audio software. All of it. I took it. Still didn't speak. Are you going to press charges? He asked. I'm not sure yet, I said. But I'm definitely not staying quiet. I spent the next 3 days submitting everything. To HR, to legal, to Natalie, and to a lawyer who worked across the street from Elise's PR agency. By the time the weekend hit, my name was cleared. No suspension, no formal reprimand. Just a quiet email from legal that said, "Thank you for your diligence. Your response was exemplary." I stared at that line for a long time. Exemplary. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt grounded. Like for the first time in months, the ground wasn't shifting under my feet. I made a list that night. Not for revenge, not really, but for clarity. They forged my mother's signature. They faked audio to sabotage my career. They erased me from the will. They accused me in front of the family. They told a child I was a thief, and I stayed silent. Until now, I didn't want fireworks. I wanted documentation, and I had it. It wasn't a dramatic entrance. No slamming doors. No speech rehearsed in front of the mirror. I just walked into the house I grew up in exactly 1 week at the public ambush that was Christmas dinner, and sat down at the same dining table where my family had accused me of theft. The air was heavy, the kind that holds its breath for you. Lorraine looked up startled but composed. Elise raised her eyebrows like she was expecting fireworks. Dorian didn't make eye contact. No one else spoke. I placed a sealed envelope on the table. Thick, unassuming. Then I set my phone down next to it. Face down, voice recorder ready. I'm not here to fight, I said, voice steady. And I'm not here to apologize for something I didn't do. No one responded. So I leaned back, crossed my arms, and kept going. But I brought something, just in case the truth wanted to join us this time. Elise let out a soft scoff. We're not doing this again. I met her eyes. You mean we're not doing me again? The punching bag, the scapegoat, the disappearing daughter. But that version of me doesn't live here anymore. I tapped my phone. Soft click. Then I slid the envelope to the center of the table. Inside was the full documentation. The original will draft with my 40% listed. Dad's email referencing the estate. The wire transfer to hospice care from my personal account. A notarized statement from Mountain View confirming receipt. A handwriting analysis showing Lorraine's signature on the new will was a forgery. Audio software logs and editing footprints tied to Elise's computer. And finally, the raw audio clips from Elise's little project, the one meant to sabotage my job. It was neatly bound, organized, cross-referenced. Because if I've learned one thing in this life, it's that the truth is easier to ignore when it's messy. But this was bulletproof. They didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, Lorraine adjusted the edge of the table runner, like it had become incredibly interesting. Dorian stared at the coffee pot, probably wishing he'd made it stronger. And Elise. She leaned back with a smirk, her favorite armor. You came to throw paperwork at us. I shrugged. I came to make sure you didn't forget who you were dealing with. You're being dramatic, she said. No, I replied. I'm being documented. She opened her mouth again, probably to pivot into some form of fake concern. But I wasn't done. This envelope is a copy, I said. The original's already with a lawyer, a compliance attorney, and a digital forensics firm. So whether or not you believe me doesn't really matter anymore. I tapped the phone again, and this time I played a recording. Elise's voice, clear as day, poured into the room. Mora's too quiet to fight back. She'll probably cry and disappear. That's her thing. Once it's in writing, it's real. No one checks signatures. Her voice, her words. No filters, No edits, no denial left on the table. A sharp inhale came from Lorraine. Dorian let out a low curse. Elise didn't flinch, but the pink drained from her face. "I don't want to blow this up," I said. "But if you try to touch my name again, personally, professionally, or legally, I will pursue fraud charges. I have everything I need to file today." Finally, Lorraine spoke, quietly. "Why would you record us?" "I didn't," I said. "You recorded yourself. I just kept the receipt." A beat passed, then another. Dorian looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing someone he didn't know, or maybe someone he never gave credit to. He didn't say thank you, or sorry. He just nodded. Maybe that was all he had left. I stood, slipped my phone back into my purse, and adjusted my scarf. "You wanted me gone. You worked for it, whispered it into the kids' ears, wrote me out of paper, out of memory, out of the family album." I looked directly at Elise, "But here's what you forgot. You taught me to stay quiet. You never taught me to stay dumb. No one followed me to the door. No one begged me to stay. And honestly, that silence was the cleanest goodbye I'd ever heard." 3 days passed. Then the fallout began. First came the internal memo from Elise's PR firm, suspended pending investigation into digital manipulation. By noon it leaked. By sunset her clients had walked. No statement, no spin, just silence and a LinkedIn bio quietly edited from founder and strategist to currently offline. Then Lorraine stepped down from her church volunteer role. Word got around. Quietly. Like most things in town do. Dorian relocated to Portland within the month. One text. No explanation. But me, I didn't light a match. I just laid down the truth and let the weight of their own lies collapse the structure. And it did. Quietly. Completely. Because sometimes, the loudest form of revenge isn't shouting. It's letting someone choke on their own narrative while you build yours. The dust didn't settle overnight. It never does. Not when the people who cut you out once shared your baby photos. Not when the betrayal is stamped with family crests and monogrammed table linens. But peace, the real kind, doesn't arrive with trumpets. It sneaks in when the shouting stops and your heartbeat finally slows. It had been a month since the night I walked out of the house I was raised in, coat on phone in my bag. Dignity intact. Since then, I'd been left alone. Blessedly, completely, quietly alone. No calls. No let's talk texts. Not even the performative guilt bouquet Lorraine might have sent in the past. And honestly, that silence was the most honest communication we'd ever had. Then one morning, just after sunrise, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't Dorian. It wasn't Lorraine. It was Veta, Elise's daughter, 10 years old, backpack slung over one shoulder, shivering slightly in her too thin jacket. I opened the door, stunned. "Mom's gone," she said. I blinked. "Gone where?" She left. She said she needed a break. "Grandma's sick." Dorian moved. A pause. "Can I stay here for a little?" I didn't say yes right away. Not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to be sure. "You sure your mom's okay with that?" Veta nodded. "She told me you'd say no." That made me smile, a sad, ironic little curl of the mouth. "Well," I said, stepping aside. "Let's prove her wrong." She walked in like she remembered every corner of my apartment. Which she did. Before things got weird. Before I stopped getting birthday invites and Christmas crafts in the mail. Before they started turning her into a foot soldier for their false stories. Veta stayed the night. Then 2. Then the week. I emailed her school. Explained the situation. Got her on a temporary guardianship form while Lorraine focused on recovery and Elise traveled to reset. Those were their words, not mine. I didn't tell Veta anything she wasn't ready for. Just answered her questions honestly. Let her cry when she needed to. Let her be 10 years old again. And somewhere in all of that, I found a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. One evening after she fell asleep coloring at the kitchen table, I walked into my room and noticed something folded on my nightstand. It was a note, written in pencil on the back of a grocery list. "You feel like home. Please don't leave me too." I sat on the edge of the bed and held that scrap of paper like it weighed more than all the legal documents combined. And for the first time since this entire thing began, I cried. Not out of anger, out of relief, because someone still saw me. Not as an ATM, T-man, not as the quiet sister, not as the villain in their narrative, just me. A few weeks later, my firm promoted me. It wasn't just about the files I'd preserved or the HR nightmare I'd neutralized. It was because of the new program I'd designed, a financial empowerment initiative for women who'd been legally and emotionally erased by the people who claimed to love them. I called it Reclaim, and every workshop started the same way. What's the first thing someone took from you without asking? Every time someone cried, not because they were broken, but because for the first time someone believed them. One rainy afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It went to voicemail. It was Dorian. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted to say thank you for not ruining me along with her. I get it now. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some acknowledgements don't need replies. They just need to land. Months passed. Then, one Sunday, Veta and I were sitting on the porch, sipping hot cocoa and watching the neighborhood dogs fail spectacularly at behaving on their leashes, when a car pulled into the driveway. Lorraine, hair thinner, shoulders stooped, eyes carrying the weight of decades she never admitted to. She got out of the car, slowly holding something small in her hand. I didn't move. She walked up, placed it on the table next to my mug, and looked at me for the first time in months. "I didn't protect you," she said. I didn't answer. She nodded like that was enough. Then she turned and left. After the car disappeared, I looked down. It was the green handkerchief, the one she used to keep in her Bible. The one I saw in her purse that night. She said she didn't hold on to old things. Inside it was a note, not a letter, just a sentence. I always knew. I just didn't want to lose the others. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket, and for once I didn't feel erased. I felt released. Here's what I've learned. Peace doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it's a quiet morning, a clean kitchen, a child asleep without fear. It's not always fireworks and redemption arcs. Sometimes it's just waking up and realizing your name didn't disappear. It simply got buried under someone else's comfort. And now it's back. On the lease, on the deed, on the life I rebuilt, not in spite of them, but because I stopped waiting for them to notice I was gunning. There's one more thing, the will. It was officially nullified. The lawyer I sent the report to contacted Lorraine privately. Between the forged signature and the uncovered manipulation, it was invalidated. No lawsuit, no court date, just a quiet rewrite of everything they'd tried to seal. I was offered a portion again. I declined it, because the real inheritance was this piece. This second shot at home one, I got to build name by name, truth by truth. They tried to erase me. Instead, I became the only thing in that family that couldn't be rewritten. Story 2. Hello, I'm Ardalin, and I was not asked to perform at my sister's wedding by my mother. She told me to wear a mismatched beige outfit, seated close to the speaker array. The stage, no. Her favorite daughter's special day has me as the background music. They assumed that I would remain mute, sit there compliantly, and vanish into the keys. However, I didn't use anything they provided. Everything they attempted to remove, I played. And then my father's voice was heard over the speakers, when the truth was revealed to the room. They buried. The people who buried it were turned against them. You will always remember their faces. What time are you listening before we get started? And from where? Tell me in the comments below if you have ever been taken advantage of by your own family to make someone else look good. On Thursday, the envelope arrived. only cream cardboard with a gold border and my mailbox number scribbled in weak pen strokes. No return address. I initially believed it to be an accidental church bulletin or some leftover trash mail. I then opened it. An invitation to a wedding was inside. My sister's Callista wedding, or Vera's daughter, more precisely. It said that you were invited to Callista Wren and Emerson Hayes' wedding. As our piano guest, we would be delighted to have you join us on this memorable day. Tentative. No name. Piano guest, only that label. Tentative. I gazed at it for so long that my fingers' heat caused the edges to curl. Not even a polite hello was exchanged. No, Adelan. My sweetheart, we hope to see you. Just a presumption that I would arrive, play a subtle tune, remain silent, and disappear without a trace. Like it would disclose something nicer. Below my thumb skimmed across the embossed lettering. It didn't. I carefully folded the card twice, flattened it one more, and put it in the drawer behind my dish towels. That afternoon, the light in my kitchen was warm. The dogwoods in Savannah were flowering once more in the spring, as if they hadn't seen me grow resentful after years of being invisible. At the community center, I had a lesson to impart. Later, while I tuned the upright Yamaha, I saw Joe 12, a frequent student of mine, waiting. He had enormous brown eyes and braces. "Miss Wren, I saw your sister in Bridal Style magazine at Walgreens," she remarked, bouncing on the bench. "She is quite attractive." I grinned. "Not the type that touches your eyes. She will shortly be married." As I adjusted the music stand, I remarked, "Large wedding." Jolie's head cocked. "Are you going to be there?" I didn't respond. Something changed inside of her when I gave her the sheet music and instructed her to play the scales, the itch behind the ribs that you know so well. When someone pronounces your sister's name as if it were steeped in gold, and yours as if it had never been thought of. Even as a little child, Callista was always the center of attention. She was the one who had piano recitals that culminated with standing ovations and matching hair ribbons. I was the silent person in the corner who clapped too loudly and too long simply to be included. I spent some time sitting in my car after class before going home. Even though the dashboard clock read 4:42 p.m., I chose not to start the engine. I watched as the children poured out of the center laughing and swinging their backpacks with that reckless exuberance that seemed to last forever. My phone rang. Vera. "Hello, Mother," I replied, already preparing myself. "Oh, good," she said. "I hoped we would meet. We're putting the finishing touches on the wedding." "I waited," she added. "Callista desires it. Elegant and tasteful. Avoid any distractions. We thought you would be able to play something light. Is there background music?" Of course, nothing spectacular, as if I were just another item on her list. I could hear her spoon clinking as she stirred something ceramic, in the middle of flower arrangements and seating plans. She went on to say that it's not really about the music. It has to do with her day. Just something basic and recognizable then. My hand gripped the phone more tightly. My forearm's corded muscles twitched as I spoke, but my voice was quiet. "Yes, everything you require. Fantastic." She gave a chirp. "Oh, and something else. Dressing up too much is not a concern. It's less official and more personal." I spent some time sitting at the kitchen table after I hung up. I sat there with my hand still on the phone, as if it were the only thing holding me to this absurd charade. We all continued to act like a family. I checked my inbox later that night for information on the practice. The guest list had been sent by Vera. I went through names I didn't know. Maybe Aunt Shelley, Dr. Mendez, the foundation chair, and Plan 1. Then I discovered it. Piano girl, Adelan Wren. Don't overdress. A pale blue folder from years ago contained an old recital program, which I carefully closed on my bookcase. It had been years since I had opened it. Before all of that, it was from my senior performance. It was in the looping script there. Solo artist, Odilon Wren. I used my finger to trace the letters. I then put the program in the same drawer as the wedding invitation after folding it, next to one another. One identified me, the person they believed me to be, right now. The peace offering she believed was to consent to play. It was the first act of her humiliation, but she was unaware of it. Late on Friday morning, the parcel came. No brand tag, no remark. Just a simple brown box with Vera's name as the sender and my address on it. I took it into the house and placed it on the tiny kitchen table, the one I used to organize lesson plans bills, and more recently, emotional harm. I peeled back the flaps and snipped the tape. It included a gown wrapped in a garment bag made of translucent plastic. Beige, not blush, not champagne, not cream. Beige. The type of hue that people forgot existed and painted in waiting rooms. The neckline dropped strangely off-center, and the hem was faded, as if it had been changed once and then abandoned. It has a little storage odor. After carrying it to the living room, I held it up to the mirror. It wasn't appropriate for the group portrait. Earlier that week, Callista had texted the bridesmaids. With their hair curled and gleaming in the golden light, 6 ladies stood in a gentle pink gradient, each wearing a dress fitted to their bodies. Mine was out of place in the picture. I picked up my phone and sent Vera a text. "Me hello, is this clothing correct compared to the others? Mine appears distinct." She responded right away. "It's impartial. In either case, you'll be at the piano. No one will pay attention to you." Yapa. I should have stopped staring at those words sooner. Not because I was shocked by them, but more because I was still easily taken aback by her, as though I continued to hold out hope that she may return with me one day, despite. At everything I knew, I'm sorry. It was an error. You're worthy of better. I forced myself to take a deep breath and placed the outfit in my travel clothing bag. I needed to get to a rehearsal dinner. By the end of the afternoon, I was entering the Rosemore Inn, the location of the welcome meal. Fresh-cut hydrangeas and garlic filled the main dining hall. Visitors were beginning to arrive. The groom's friends, relatives from another state. Some are socializing with courteous champagne, while others are wearing name badges. Grins. At the far end of a long dinner table, I saw my name wrapped on a little card. The door that led to the catering kitchen was directly next to my chair. With a brief glance and the nod they give employees. Not customers, a server brought me water. Callista arrived with flawless foundation silky silk and a radiant appearance a few minutes later. She had her hair styled in easy waves. When she saw me, she came up and gave me the coldest kiss possible. "Good, I see. You succeeded." "I said," she said. "To avoid having to change the seats, I informed the planner that you will be there for the musical performance. You're proficient in classical music." "Correct, simple. You'd be okay with basic," I said. Her tone was light, like she was discussing napkin colors. I nodded once too tightly. Of course, I said simple is my specialty. Before I could sit, Emerson approached. He extended a hand with a politician's smile. "You must be Ardalan," he said. "Callista told us you were the family pianist." The groom's mother, a tall woman in a burgundy wrap dress, leaned in with interest. "That's sweet," she said, patting my arm. "It's so important to have hired help you can trust at a big event like this." Hired help. I opened my mouth, but Vera had already joined the circle. She laughed politely, brushing the comment off like it didn't bruise. Odilon has been playing piano since she was a little girl. She's always been reliable. Reliable! Not talented, not accomplished, just dependable. The way you talk about someone who feeds your cat when you're on vacation. I held my breath and smiled. We sat. I picked at the edges of my plate while the rest of the room clinked glasses and laughed like old friends. Occasionally, someone would glance my way, maybe to confirm I hadn't wandered off. But no one asked me anything beyond what I planned to play and whether I'd be wearing something more formal tomorrow. When it was over, I thanked the servers, stepped outside, and walked to my car under the soft glare of streetlights. My shoes clicked against the gravel lot in that lonely way that makes you realize how small your presence really is. Back at the Airbnb, I changed out of the beige dress and laid it flat across the guest bed. The fabric caught the overhead light, dull and lifeless. It looked more like a hotel curtain than a dress. I stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch, but I did something in my chest. Twisted. Not sharp, just deep. Like a bruise that was never allowed to fade. After a while, I unzipped the front pocket of my suitcase and pulled out the black velvet folder I always brought. To performances, inside were my pieces, Rachmaninoff list. Chopin music that used to make me feel like I was more than background. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened to the first page. I wasn't here to take up space, but I wasn't here to disappear either. I told myself it didn't matter. I was here for peace, for family, for them. But the sun had barely climbed past the magnolia trees when I realized I'd made a mistake. The wedding ceremony was set outdoors beneath white drapery and low-hanging string lights that were already flickering softly in the early afternoon haze. Garden chairs faced a makeshift altar framed with climbing roses. Somewhere behind me, a quartet of servers lined up water glasses and repositioned the dessert table under a shaded canopy. I'd arrived early, Vera's orders. She'd wanted me to test the mic. Make sure your little piano works with the setup. As if I'd wheeled the Steinway baby grand here myself. The staff had positioned the piano awkwardly off to the side, tucked between the speaker stack and a catering tent that smelled of chicken marsala and rosemary. It wasn't near the stage, nor was it angled toward the audience. It was tucked in like a piece of furniture. Someone didn't know where to place. I ran a hand over the keys and adjusted the bench, already feeling the sweat settle between my shoulder blades. I was wearing the beige dress again. This time, I hadn't bothered to smooth out the creases. Vera's voice rang out behind me, already mic'd up. Let's run a quick check, shall we? Just a few notes. I nodded and played a soft arpeggio. The speakers caught it late, echoing the sound like it didn't quite belong in the space. I tried again, slower, and Vera turned toward the crowd, lifting her hand to shield her eyes from the sun. Perfect, she said. Then she turned back to the gathering guests and smiled into the mic. Everyone welcome. What a beautiful day for a celebration. Before we begin, a quick note. Today's ceremony is accompanied by a special touch. Our talented little helper will be providing background music throughout. She's always been so good at staying in the background. There was light laughter. A few people clapped, unsure if they were supposed to. I didn't flinch, but I felt the twitch in my hand on the keys, just a flutter, like my body trying to betray me. I forced a small smile and focused on the black and ivory in front of me. Keep your head down, I told myself. It's only music. You've done this 100 times. I waited. The real signal hadn't come yet. Vera walked off the platform, and a few bridesmaids passed by, adjusting their hair, taking selfies, complimenting each other's lashes. One glanced over at me and said, "Cute dress," in the way someone might say, "Nice umbrella" when it's sunny. Then Callista approached, floating down the aisle like the day belonged to her alone. She looked breathtaking, of course. Her gown sculpted to her figure like poured silk. She had always known how to catch the light. She leaned in close lips, almost brushing my ear. Her perfume smelled like lavender and condescension. play this, won't you?" she whispered, sliding a folded sheet of music onto the stand. "I wrote it just for today. It's called Promise of a Perfect Day. Simple and soft, just like you used to play when we were little." I blinked down at the handwritten notes. It was basic, predictable chord progressions. A melody that tiptoed instead of dancing. It wasn't just amateur. It was childish. And she wanted me to play it in front of all these people. The past tugged at me like a thread unraveling. I was teen again, sitting under hot stage lights at a regional competition, my fingers flying through Chopin's Ballade in G minor. Vera sat in the third row, hands folded tightly in her lap. Callista had been near the back wearing a floral dress and an impatient frown. Afterward, she hadn't clapped. That same night, she cried in the car. I remember the whimper. "You always make it about you." Vera had turned around and snapped. "Could you just stop stealing every moment from your sister?" That was the moment something cracked. The piano had once felt like breath and fire in my bones. After that night, it felt like guilt, like vanity, like something I should hide. I looked at the sheet again. Simple and soft, of course, so I stay forgettable. The guests began to shift. The procession was about to start. I adjusted the music on the stand. My fingers hovered over the keys, and I played. The melody tiptoed across the garden like a child unsure of its place. It said nothing. It filled space. It echoed softly, then vanished, before anyone could remember. It was there. The applause from the ceremony still echoed faintly across the lawn when I slipped away from the noise. I didn't go far, just beyond the flickering string lights through the narrow stone path that curved behind the reception tent. The magnolias thinned out, and I found myself standing before the hydrangea bushes near the fence line. And that's where she was, Grandma Miriam, half sunk into a white wicker chair, her cardigan draped loosely over her shoulders. She was humming softly, the way she always did, when her hands weren't busy. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound until I heard it again in the dark. She turned her head before I spoke, like she'd already known I was coming. "There you are," she said. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, but it still carried the same warmth that had soothed me through every skinned knee and disappointment. "You looked lovely out there, even if they tried to hide you." I sat down on the small bench across from her. The silence between us felt like a blanket, familiar, safe. She reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pressed something into my palm. A folded envelope yellowed at the edges. "Your father meant to give you this," she whispered. "They never sent it." I looked down. No return address. Just my name in his old handwriting. The seal was already broken. I opened it slowly, like it might shatter in the air. Inside was a letter from Giuliard. A full scholarship summer intensive, then fall admission dated 15 years ago. I forgot how to breathe. I read it again. Slower this time. My eyes catching the line about exceptional promise and rare control of tone. I remembered that audition, remembered coming home. My fingers aching from the Rachmaninoff cadenza, my chest still heaving from nerves. That night, Vera had walked into my room and said they weren't interested. Too many better candidates this year. And just like that, I'd believed her. Swallowed it whole. My throat clenched. Grandma didn't speak. She just watched me. Her eyes damp but steady. I knew then she'd known. Maybe not everything, but enough. The rest of the puzzle fit too easily. A week later, Vera had stood beside Callista at that stupid ribbon cutting for the Youth Arts Collective, a music non-profit Callista founded, with backing from the same foundation that partnered with Giuliard. I remembered the article in the paper. I remembered how Vera kept calling Callista a visionary. I remembered shrinking. My dream had never failed me. It had been buried. I sat there, hunched forward, the letter still in my lap. My fingers had curled slightly, but I hadn't realized until I noticed the faint crease I'd made in the paper. I smoothed it gently, then folded it again. This time on my terms. A breeze rustled the trees behind us from the main lawn. Laughter floated out with the faint chime of glassware. Grandma reached over, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "You weren't weak," she said. "They just made sure you felt small enough to forget how strong you were." I nodded, but didn't speak. I wasn't sure I could yet. Later, when I returned to the reception hall, my heels clicked too loud against the hardwood floor. The lights inside had dimmed for the slideshow. Everyone faced the projector screen, half lit in flickers of color and childhood nostalgia. The title card read, "Our Journey. Callista and Family." I stood near the back. The first slide showed Callista at 4 in a 2 to the next, blowing out candles on her 6th birthday. Then came recitals, Callista holding a tiny violin, then posing with a local choir. There were beach photos, Thanksgiving dinner. A blurry video clip of Vera adjusting Callista's sash at a middle school awards night. I waited. The loop continued. There were no pictures of me, not even in the background. No Halloween costumes. No piano trophies. Not even the group shot at the lake house, where I knew for a fact I'd been the one behind the camera. The audience clapped politely at the end. Vera stood and lifted a champagne glass, glowing under the amber lights. "To my beautiful daughter," she said, "every moment with you has been a joy to relive." I didn't lift my glass. I didn't even blink. My eyes stayed fixed on the blank screen. Now white again. Like someone had wiped it clean. Like a chalkboard that never had my name on it to begin with. They hadn't just rewritten the story. They had made sure I didn't exist in it. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't walk out. But inside, something shifted. A weight I'd carried for years. The need to be quiet, to not ruin the piece, started to slide off inch by inch. This time, it wasn't going to crush me. The air was still cool when I arrived at the hotel. The kind of heavy quiet that only happens early in the morning before weddings. I walked through the valet lot, clutching my folder of sheet music and adjusting the hem of that beige dress. Still a little too short on one side. Still not quite mine. I approached the main doors with the printed confirmation in hand, expecting a nod and a welcome. Instead, I was stopped. A hotel coordinator clipboard in one hand, headset clipped to her ear, held up her palm. "Hi, vendors are checking in around the back," she said without looking up. "I'm not with catering," I said. "I'm the bride's sister." She blinked, pausing for the first time. "Oh," she said slowly, flipping pages. "Sorry. You're just, you weren't listed in the family section. We had you with music services." I stood still, hearing the words echo in the atrium's glass walls. She waved someone over with a strained smile. "It's fine. Just let her through." I was led around the side entrance anyway. Through the service hallway, past a man carrying stacked linens, a teenager unboxing plastic champagne flutes. When I emerged into the prep area of the ballroom, I had this strange sense I had never left backstage. Later, I made my way into the adjoining breakfast room for the family welcome meal. Vera had organized a small, formal affair. Her version of Southern charm, which meant assigned seating and monogrammed cloth napkins. The tables were set in a wide U-shape. I found my name not next to Callista, not between any cousins, not even in the cluster labeled family. Just one small card at the edge, set slightly askew. Miss Odilon Wren, piano accompanist. I stood there longer than I should have. A staff member breezed by, adjusted a centerpiece, glanced at me like I was in her way. I sat down quietly from across the room. I watched the rest of them filter in. One cousin and a matching blush pink wrap dress. Another bridesmaid squealed over mimosas. Then came Viera, gliding in with the familiarity of someone completely in control of the scene. Callista entered last. Of course, hair swept into a chignon skin, glowing under the soft gold lighting. When she stepped into the room, people actually clapped. Vera walked to her, kissed her cheek. Then she turned to me with a practiced smile. "Try not to play too loud during the vows," she said under her breath, adjusting the neckline of Callista's dress. "It's Callista moment. We don't want distractions." I nodded, but didn't respond. Because if I had spoken, it would have come out as a scream. Instead, I stood and excused myself, said something vague about needing to tune the piano. No one really noticed out in the hallway. I leaned against the cold marble wall and pulled my phone from my clutch. I opened my draft folder. There it was, just as I'd left it. Subject resignation, community arts program. I had written the draft weeks ago, assuming that after this wedding, after keeping my head down one last time, I'd be free. I'd walk away from teaching from music from the last Heather that kept me hoping for something that never came. But now, I wasn't so sure. I stared at the blinking cursor. My finger hovered over delete, then hovered over send. Then I locked the screen. I reached into my bag for tissues instead. My fingers closed around something firmer, thicker. The Giuliard letter. I had placed it there before leaving the Airbnb, folded carefully beside my lipstick and metronome keychain. I slid it out. My thumb ran over the crease I'd made last night. Full academic award. Room and board. 5 words that had once meant everything, then meant nothing, and now meant something different altogether. I could have gone. I should have gone. But I didn't. And the thing is, it wasn't because I wasn't ready. It was because someone made that choice for me and called it love. A few deep breaths, steady but tight. Then I folded the letter and slipped it back in. When I returned to the breakfast room, the plates were mostly cleared. People laughed. Someone had started a toast. Callista beamed. I walked back to my seat without a word, but before sitting, I unlatched the leather folder of sheet music I'd carried all morning. Tucked behind the requested selections was my own copy, handwritten, edited, bolded notes. Swells I had mapped with pencil years ago. I switched it out. No one saw. No one asked. But they would hear. By the time guests began to settle into their white folding chairs beneath the magnolia canopy, the air had turned thick with anticipation and sweat. I stood alone near the piano, half in shadow, half in glare from the low sun, filtering through the draped linen canopy above my dress, still beige. Still quietly offensive, blended perfectly into the background linen, as if I'd been meant to disappear. I could hear the distant chatter of cousins and neighbors' waiters, moving trays of champagne, and beyond the gauzy curtain at the garden's edge. Callista voice laughing, delicate, practiced. I glanced down at the keyboard and rested my hands above the keys. My fingers hovered, not touching, just breathing. There. They'd told me exactly what to play. Promise of a perfect day. A piece that wasn't written for music but for optics. Light. Frothy. Forgettable. Just the right soundtrack to make the bride look radiant without drawing attention anywhere else. But as the first note approached, I didn't reach for Callista sheet music. Instead, I reached for my own. Tucked between the pages like it had always been there. I placed the sheet gently onto the stand. Then I began. The first note came slow, heavier than I'd intended. Almost unsure. But then the second found it, and the third reached deeper. It was a melody I hadn't played aloud in 15 years. I'd written it during those lost afternoons in high school, when the world felt like too much, and yet nowhere near enough. I played it to soothe myself when the rejection letters came in, not knowing they'd never been sent. The chords were dark, then rising minor turns that flirted with hope. There was no bright resolution, just a truth I'd carried in secret for too long. The guests shifted in their chairs. A few whispered. Someone cleared their throat, but no one interrupted. And I didn't stop. A hush settled like a soft blanket over the crowd. Even the servers had paused at the tent's edge. Then halfway through the piece, just as I lifted into the bridge, the speakers crackled. A man's voice filled the garden. Not a stranger's. My father's to my daughter Odilon, the one who taught herself to fly, even when we clipped her wings. A collective intake of breath spread across the lawn. Several heads turned, including the minister. The voice continued slow and worn with emotion. I recorded this the day Giuliard called. I wish I could have protected that dream longer. I wish I'd fought harder. I froze, hands suspended above the keys. The last time I heard that voice was at his funeral. The recording played on not long, but long enough. Enough to slice open every room I'd been locked out of. Enough to say what no one else had dared. Gasps turned to silence. Callista framed perfectly at the start of the aisle, clutching her bouquet like it might break. Stood motionless beneath the floral arch. Vera didn't blink. She sat stone still, eyes narrowed toward the speaker, as if she could will it off with just her rage. I closed my eyes and let the final notes fall gently from my hands. They didn't land in applause. They landed in silence. The kind of silence that swells in your chest, that makes people look at each other differently. For a second. No one moved. I looked up. Not even the wind dared. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt undeniable. The final chord still lingered in the air, suspended between the branches of the magnolia trees and the silence that swallowed the courtyard whole. No one moved. No one dared. Callista remained frozen beneath the floral archway bouquet, wilting slightly in her grip. Vera hadn't spoken, but her eyes darted like she was searching for a script, one that had somehow slipped from her hand. Then came the sound of a chair gently creaking. It was Fane Rowe. He had once been my conductor years ago, when I still believed talent could rise above politics now. Older, heavier, but no less sharp in presence. He stood from the second row and stepped forward with the deliberate grace only a man used to commanding a stage could possess. In his hand was a folded paper. The edges were worn, the kind of creases that only come from being carried and protected. I wasn't sure if this would ever leave my briefcase. He began, voice calm but steady. 15 years ago, I signed this letter on Giuliard letterhead. A full scholarship for Odilon Wren. Gasps rippled across the crowd, like wind cutting through wheat. He raised the page facing the guests like a conductor raising his baton. Her acceptance was confirmed. Her attendance was blocked. I didn't breathe. My fingers curled beneath the edge of the piano bench. Vera's complexion paled. She gripped the edge of her seat, as if she could steady reality by anchoring herself physically. Her lips parted, then pressed shut again. Nothing came out, but Callista. Callista stepped forward, shaking her head with forced lightness. That letter, it was never mailed. You don't have proof. She could have handled that kind of pressure, that kind of institution. Thane turned to her, expression unreadable. It wasn't mailed because someone in her family requested the foundation redirect the funds that I do have in writing. A murmur erupted, not confusion this time, but realization. A few guests turned toward Vera, some toward Callista. A couple stood from their seats, entirely edging closer, like they needed to see it for themselves. I didn't move. I didn't need to. A small voice, barely audible, cut through the growing buzz. She taught me. Everyone turned. It was Lydia 12 in braces and ballet flats. One of my piano students from the community center. She stepped forward, twisting a wrinkled tissue between her fingers. She taught me what it means to believe in your sound, even when no one else hears it. Her voice cracked and she blinked hard. I used to whisper in everything, even when I played. She told me that silence doesn't make you safe. It just makes you easier to ignore. Her last words came out as a whisper, but they struck louder than any mic'd speech that day. Lydia looked toward me, eyes glassy but proud. Then she turned and walked back to her seat. There was no applause, no music, just shifting silence. A woman from the groom's side, his aunt. I later learned said just loud enough for others to hear. She's the only reason I didn't leave. After the second toast. Another man near her nodded. Same. I still hadn't stood. My hands rested neatly on my lap. My gaze remained steady. Vera looked like she might speak, might shout, but no one handed her a microphone. For once there was no sudden favor, no rescue moment where she could reclaim control. And Callista. She reached for the mic stand behind the floral pedestal, but her hand meant nothing. The microphone was gone. Someone had taken it before she got there. I didn't smile, not because I didn't feel something rise within me, but because it wasn't joy. It was something else, something quieter, older. The sound of a truth finally being heard. Callisto's fingers hovered in the air, awkward and twitching. The microphone had vanished like someone had quietly decided she'd spoken enough for one lifetime. She cleared her throat, forced a brittle smile, and raised her voice without the amplifier. Let's not get lost in theatrics. She began, her tone pitched higher than usual, as if volume could substitute for credibility. This day, this ceremony was meant to be a celebration of love, of unity, not personal grievances or exaggerated performances. Her gaze swept the courtyard like a performer, gauging a reluctant audience. I understand emotions are running high, she said, hand dramatically resting on her chest. But I think we can all agree that forged letter and staged confessions don't belong at a wedding. She paused, expecting some polite agreement. There was none. Still, she pressed forward. I have documentation here that confirms order. Lynn's application was rejected. I didn't want to share this, but given what's happened. She turned, gesturing to a man in a dark suit who handed her a printed paper from a slim leather folder. She held it up like proof in a courtroom. Giuliard said no. So while I'm sure the story was heartfelt, it wasn't real. And I'm sorry, but we can't keep letting a piano player hijack an entire wedding. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink, but I felt every stare shift between us like a ripple across a pond. For a moment, the crowd was still uncertain, testing her tone, weighing her confidence. The lie was dressed up, delivered clean, and rehearsed. I recognized the trick. She was trying to rewrite the narrative quickly, while the emotions were still raw. Vera gave her a slight, steady nod from her seat. The kind of support that says keep going. They might still believe you. And for one split second, I saw it working. Then a voice interrupted from the side. I don't care who said what the man said, standing tall in a crisp gray jacket. I want to hear her play again. A murmur ran through the guests. Someone clapped. Another followed. Then a third. And none of it was for Callista. She tried to speak again, but her words were buried under a tide of rising applause. The spotlight, once fixed squarely on the aisle, now turned almost hesitantly back toward the grand piano. I stood the beige fabric of my dress, brushing past my calves, and walked toward the bench. There was no speech, no declaration. I simply sat. Someone had placed my music folder on the stand, but inside I slid in a different page. One I had handwritten years ago, a piece I never finished until last night. The melody began low, a single line. Then another joined it. And then came the thread that stitched them together. The lullaby my grandmother used to hum. The one I heard beside the hydrangeas. The notes weren't sweet. They were resolute. The chords didn't cry. They confessed. And as the music climbed, winding through every omission, every unspoken insult, every moment I was told to sit down and smile, I felt my chest open. Not with grief, with clarity. People leaned forward. Some stood out of the corner of my eye. I saw a staff member approach the front. In his hand, crumpled but intact, was the original wedding invitation. The one that read, "Piano Girl Tentative." He placed it gently beside the bench. Someone had scribbled over it, and blue pen for words. Small, but sure. The one they buried, but someone else had crossed that out too, and beneath it, in bolder strokes. The one they should have celebrated. I kept playing. I didn't look up. Not even when I heard someone crying in the third row. Not even when Callista turned her back to the crowd. And not even when Vera slowly, silently rose from her seat and slipped out the side garden gate. The piece ended not in triumph, but in stillness, like a lake after a storm. No cue was needed. The applause roared sudden and full. Not rushed, not polite. It echoed across the courtyard, across the trees, across 15 years of silence. And it did not stop. The wind had picked up slightly by the time the last guests filtered out of the garden. Courtyard. Petals that had been meticulously scattered for the ceremony now floated unevenly across the brick walkway. Champagne flutes stood half full, lipstick stained. Forgotten. A string quartet quietly packed up without fanfare. The applause had long faded, but its echo lingered. I stayed seated with my grandmother on the terrace of the hotel. She had brought us 2 cups of tea. Hers was steeped strong and dark. Mine lighter, though neither of us had touched them. She leaned slightly forward in her chair, her fingers folded around the envelope like she was tucking a memory back into place. "The world didn't get it wrong, darling," she said, her voice low but steady. "They just got there late." I didn't say anything. I just watched her fold the Giuliard letter carefully, the same way she used to fold warm towels fresh from the line below us. Vera walked past. She didn't stop, didn't pause, just walked. Heels clipped shoulders tight, gaze somewhere far off in the middle distance. She didn't look up at me, and for the first time in years, I didn't look down. Callista stood at the edge of the steps near one of the magnolia trees. She held her bouquet like an afterthought. Not a single guest had followed her, not even the wedding planner. She caught my eye. There was a moment, small, almost microscopic, where her chin lifted slightly, as if waiting for me to come over. Say something. Maybe offer her a graceful exit. I didn't. She blinked first, and I stayed seated beside my grandmother. Later that evening, as the cleanup crew folded chairs and rolled away cables, I heard someone speaking near the exit. It was a man in a dark jacket, one of the donors who had spoken to Thane earlier. I caught only fragments. Misleading representation, ethical concern, board review. They were talking about Callisto's Music Foundation. Vera's name came up, then disappeared just as quickly. Not shouted, just noted, the kind of note that lingers in the air long after the room's been cleared. Inside, someone was updating the event program on the venue's website. I watched through the open glass doors as the line beneath musical guest changed, no longer background accompaniment. Now feature performance, Odilon Wren. Original composition. I didn't smile, but I did breathe. A staff member approached from the side garden. It was the same one who'd handed me the crumpled invitation earlier. He held it again now, even more creased than before. "Someone left this near the piano," he said. "Thought you might want it." I opened it gently. The words piano girl, tentative, were still there, but scribbled out now, covered in black letters on the back. Black pen pressed deep into the fibers. Thank you for saving the room. Weeks later, I pinned that note to my corkboard in the office at the community center. Just beneath it, I unfolded an old recital program, the one from my teenage years, the one I hadn't looked at in more than a decade. My name was still there, written in swirled script. Odilon Wren soloist. I didn't cry, but I let it stay unfolded. It was a Monday when I met her. My new student, 13 years old. Elbows too pointy for the bench, sneakers too loud for the carpet. She barely spoke, but she never broke eye contact when she sat down. I asked her if she wanted to learn scales. She shook her head. They say I'm too quiet to matter. She mumbled too invisible to be heard. I looked at her, and for the briefest moment I saw myself again. Hand smaller, voice dimmer, heart louder than anyone ever knew. So I smiled and said, then play something they can't ignore. She looked down at the keys, and I looked ahead. Not because I wanted the spotlight. I just wanted them to hear me. And this time, they did.